Okay, if you will recall from last week, it's like the perils of Pauline in terms of the way Judges sort of works. But uh, we were watching the events transpire of Sisera, who was a commander of the army against Israel, and how the scripture says he left his chariot and went on foot and got to the tent of Jael, which we're paraphrasing now. He asked her to stand guard and give him something to drink, and she does both. And he fell asleep. Bad on him. Should never fallen asleep. And got way too comfortable. She takes a tent peg and puts it against his head, apparently, and takes a hammer and sends the tent peg through his head, nailing him to the ground, which left him with a splitting headache, no doubt. Whether he knew it or not, I'm not sure. I doubt that he knew he had a headache. But nonetheless, he is there. And so verse 22 of chapter 4 says, Barak came by in pursuit of Sisera, and Jael went out to meet him. Come, she said, I will show you the man you're looking for. So he went with her, and there lay Sisera with the tent peg through his temple, dead. She didn't have to worry about him wandering off, and didn't have to handcuffing anything. She had a much more secure way of holding him. And the significance of this verse is that Deborah had made the statement to Barak that because he had not wanted to go without her to support him in this battle. She said, you won't get the credit for the victory because it will be given to a woman. And the woman was Jael, because Jael's the one that executed Sisera. Now, verse 23, on that day, God subdued Jabin, the Canaanite king, before the Israelites, and the hand of the Israelites grew stronger and stronger against Jabin, the Canaanite king, until they destroyed him. So after Sisera is taken out, it takes a lot of the firepower out of the king, and eventually, over time, the Israelites, under the hand of God and God's direction, grew and grew and grew and became more and more stronger. And eventually, they took out the Canaanite king. All right. Now, chapter 5, we're going to skip a lot of it because it is a rehearsal of what we already have seen and read, but it's Deborah's song. Deborah not only was a judge, she wrote songs and apparently performed them. And this is a rehearsal of what has just happened of Israel's victory over the Canaanite king and Sisera. Not unusual. We find several different occasions in the Old and the New, even in the New Testament, of songs being written to commemorate battles and feats of the Israelites' success against the foreign nations. So I'm going to skip down to a part here of going down to verse 19, because this is a significant passage and it explains something we said we'd come back to and explain. Kings came, they fought. The kings of Canaan fought at Taranach by the waters of Megiddo, but they carried off no silver, no plunder. From the heavens the stars fought from their courses. They fought against Sisera. The river Kishon swept them away. The age-old river, the river of Kishon, galloping, go his mighty steeds. Cursed Moraz said the angel to the Lord, cursed the people bitterly because they did not come to the help of the Lord, to help the Lord against the mighty. All right. Apparently, from this we can gather that the way God intervened in this case, God intervenes in all these battles. But in this particular case, I'm not sure how the stars got involved. I don't know how that would be done. But I do know what rain does to a river. Apparently, God caused a flood or a flooding issue. And the river Kishon, if you remember, it was said that Sisera would take his army down to the river Kishon. Well, if you think it's a good idea to have an iron chariot out in the mud, probably not. I'm not sure any chariot would survive, but the iron chariot certainly would not survive. It would become difficult to drive. It would sink in the mud, and you'd be so. If you are Sisera and you are literally stuck in the mud, no pun intended. What are you going to do? Well, you're not going to sit there and wait for the bad guys, good guys in this case, to come get you. You're going to leave the chariot there and go on foot, which is what we read earlier. Sisera did, but they was not explained why he did that. And at the time, it seems rather silly to leave a good chariot to go on foot. But if your chariot is stuck in the mud, probably a good time to leave the chariot. Probably should have left the chariot earlier. Anyway, so that's why Sisera left his chariot and went on foot and got into his meeting with Jael, which was not good on his part either, thereby showing once again he probably should have stayed in the chariot. But he didn't, and as a result, it cost him his life. So we're going on through this now, and again, there are things to be looked at in chapter 5, but not a great deal. I will look also at verse 20, beginning right at the end of the chapter. Verse 24 says, through the windows peered Sisera's mother. Behind the lattice, she cried out, why is his chariot so long in coming? Why is the clatter of his chariots delayed? The wisest of her ladies answered, or indeed she keeps saying to herself, are they not finding and dividing the spoils? A girl or two for each man, colorful garments of plunder for Sisera, colorful garments embroidered, highly embroidered garments for my neck, all this as plunder. Sisera's mother is known Sisera as a warrior. He's a successful warrior. Apparently he has bought plunder before. Now he doesn't show up. And she is a typical mother, and mothers have a tendency to be worried about their kids. You wouldn't know anything about that, but take my word for it. I've read a lot on it. I've never been a mother. I have been a kid. I never went anywhere, so mother wasn't very worried, but nonetheless, the fact is mothers of all ages will still worry about their kids, regardless of how old their kids are. Sisera's no kid, but mom's concerned that he ain't showing up. They try to persuade her that everything's going okay. They're probably just dividing up the spoils, and she's going, I don't see any spoils, I don't see Sisera. So she has, of course, the um, uh, reality will soon hit her that Sisera's not going to be back. He's still disposed in the tent. But verse 31 of chapter 5 is sort of the epilogue. It says, so may all your enemies perish, O Lord, but may they who love you be like the sun when it rises in the strength. And the land had peace for 40 years. So here we go through the routine again, the cycle again. God raises up a judge, in this case, Deborah, and Judge Deborah, with the help of Barak and Jael, put down this situation with the Canaanites, and we now have 40 years of peace and calm. Because why? Because the Israelites turned back to God. All right. From there, we're going to go to a judge that you're more familiar with, perhaps, than some of the other judges. There's more about this particular judge in the book of Judges, so we'll be working with this individual for a period of time. Chapter 6. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites. Again, I want to stress over and over and over that nothing happens that God isn't involved with. Nothing surprises God. This may be one of the more difficult things for us to get our minds around, because we, being human, don't have that capacity. People make mistakes. People don't know things. People make choices and then wish they hadn't made them. And it would appear from time to time that the people we deal with, or the people on the other side of the world, there is no control. Everything's out of control. If you watch the news tonight, or you watched the news last night, or the last week, or the week before, it appears that chaos is everywhere. I assure you, what looks chaotic to us is under the control of God. Now, God can cause chaos, and he does. But when chaos happens, it happens under the control of God. Now, am I eliminating Satan in any of this? Of course not. Satan is behind the chaos. But what do we know about Satan's power?
Still under God's control.
It's under God's control. God, Satan can't do anything God doesn't approve of. In other words, God is not the one doing the chaos, creating the chaos necessarily. But when Satan creates chaos, it's because God said, I'll allow you to do that. Satan goes around the earth, according to Peter, as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. We made this point before, but I will remind you in case you have A, either forgotten it, or B, you're new to my class and haven't heard it. If you stay with me long enough, you'll hear it numerous times, because I think it's a very important point. When you watch videos on National Geographic or wherever you happen to watch lions, in case you're a lion person that likes to watch lions, when they start coming up on a herd of animals that become food for them, how do they approach the herd?
Sneakily.
Very, very quietly. They sneak up on, and they usually get the poor cripple one in the back, which makes me feel good. It's always the crippled people that get jumped on. But anyway, the herds, when they're right on top of the herd of elk or whatever animal it may be, before the herd realizes they're there. And they attack and they hit and they grab what they can, however many lions there are, one or a dozen. They get as much as they can get, and the herd runs off, and they get what they want. They settle down, they have lunch, and discuss politics or whatever. Whatever his lions do, I don't know. But the point is, how did they get there? How were they able to capture those animals? Because they had the element of surprise. Does Satan have the element of surprise?
Yes.
No. Why? How does Peter say he roams the earth?
Roaring.
As a roaring lion.
Yeah, that's true.
So he doesn't sneak up.
And he is seeking those
whom he may devour. He may devour. He may or may not, depending on whether they stand still or they run off, as the case may be. But there is the opportunity for them to run off because they hear him coming. Now, how does that fit into us? God put a roar in the lion for a reason, as Satan. Satan cannot possess anyone without their permission. Why? Because he warns you he's coming. Now, you don't have to be afraid of the roar. You can stand there and go, I don't care. Not going to bother me. He can have me if he wants me. And in spite of the roar, there are people who allow Satan to attack and devour them. But the people cannot say that it came as a surprise or without warning. For the lion always roars before it attacks in God's world of Satan versus us. For example, I will submit to you that prior to Peter's statement, and in the first century, Satan could do something he can't do now. He could possess people with evil spirits. Okay? You have examples of the young man. The father brings the young man to Jesus and says, comes to the disciples first. Jesus is just coming down off the Mount of Transfiguration at the time. And he says, I want my son healed. He throws himself into the fire. He throws, the spirit, evil spirit, throws him into the fire and throws him into the water and all this kind of stuff. And then the disciples are not able to do anything about it until Jesus gets there. And then Jesus commands the spirit to come out of it. I will submit to you that does not happen anymore today. That Satan does not have the power to overtake an individual without permission, without them allowing it to happen, without their being warned. Now, if you stand still long enough, and if you invite Satan in, can Satan overtake you? No. I think Satan has the power and uses people that way. They may be possessed in a sense, but they're possessed with permission. And that's very important over the difference between what was going on back then and what happens now. Now, you have, and of course, you in the world, you can see this played out. in the movies, we see it frequently. There's a brand new, y'all all want to write this down because you don't want to miss this. There's a new movie coming out of The Exorcist. They're redoing The Exorcist from back 25 years ago, whatever it was. Okay, in the Exorcist, Satan has the power to possess individuals without their permission. He just does it, which means the movie's fiction, not fact. But does Satan have that power now? And I will submit, no, he does not. However, if you allow Satan, if you're willing to play with the fire long enough, then not be concerned about it, not do something about it, Satan, eventually can get to the point of basically controlling your thoughts, your actions, and the whole bit. Now, is it impossible from that, if that is possible, that Satan can control you by your permission? Do you also have the ability to stop giving Satan permission and go back or become a child of God? And the answer is yes. It won't require throwing a spirit out of you and all of that sort of thing. When you're possessed, now when people are possessed, it's by their choice. So it's not a matter of seeing someone get thrown into the fire or the water or whatever. That part doesn't happen. It's a matter of mental acceptance of Satan and saying, it's okay. I'll let you live in my body, and I'll serve you as opposed to the Lord. Now, with that thought in mind, we're either going to serve God or we're going to serve Satan. As servants of Satan, we are possessed. If you're a servant, you are owned. All right? So when Jesus says you're either going to serve God or you're going to serve mammon, and that is mammon and not mammon. That confused me when our preacher arrived, but I'm not confused. I was quickly told that it was not mammon. No, it's close. Anyway, you're either going to serve God or you're going to serve Satan. When you are a servant, you are under a master. The master owns you. So Satan can own an individual and does own individuals. He owns most of the individuals. He owns the vast majority of individuals on the face of the earth, unfortunately. And how is the only way to come from the ownership of Satan to the ownership of God? Through the blood of Christ, through obedience to the gospel. That's how we change the ownership. If we are not taught the gospel, if we don't obey the gospel as it's written, who do we belong to? Satan. Are there people in the world who think they're owned by God who are still owned by Satan? Absolutely, because they have been taught and are believing that what they have done in order to come under the umbrella of God, as it were, is a certain form of obedience to the gospel, which is not what the Bible says. But they believe that it's there. For many will say in that day, did we do many mighty works in your name? And Jesus' response will be, depart from me, I never knew you. So we have a situation where ownership of man by Satan or by God is what we deal with every day. Is it possible to be owned by God and then reject that ownership and become owned by Satan? Yes. So we're not in a situation of once saved, always saved, because it's possible to make the choice. But how does it happen? It happens when I choose to leave God and go to Satan. Not when Satan attacks me and pulls me away from God. But when I say, hey, I've had all this God thing I want to see how the other side lives. And I leave God and his protection. And I go to where Satan is. I allow Satan to tempt me. I allow him to take me away. But he cannot forcibly take individuals away from God. They are taken away from God when they choose to leave. And this is very, very important because there are a lot of people who believe that once God's got you, Satan can't get you. And it's true unless you choose to leave. If you think about it, this is what happened in the parable of the prodigal son. Did the father kick the son out?
No, he left.
He left. He wanted to leave. He arranged things to where he was gone, where he made all the arrangements. I want the inheritance that's mine. Now, I'm tired of being here. I want to go anywhere but here. So he leaves the father by his own volition and goes into the far country. Was never forced, was never cajoled, was never challenged to leave. He leaves, and eventually, after he's had enough pig slop and been mistreated long enough after the money's all gone, he comes back to the father, and the father accepts him back and gives him all the finery that goes on with acceptance, only to find out that the older son has now left. But he didn't go out of town. He just went out in the backyard or on the back porch, but it's the same as, because he leaves the father's control and what the father owns, and he's mad because he's been there all this time and the father doesn't appreciate it, so he stands out on the back porch and refuses to come in and be part of the family. Both boys left. One came back. Both boys left, but neither boy was forced to leave, nor was he swept up by Satan and drug out. Nor there's no possession here against the will of the individual. All right. So, all right. Verse 2, because the power of Midian was so oppressive, the Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in the mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples invaded the country. The Midianites were a nomad kind of people. In other words, they just wandered, not aimlessly, but they had no particular location. They were just bands of marauders, if you will. They camped on the land and ruined the crops all the way to Gaza and did not spare a living thing for Israel. Neither sheep nor cattle nor donkeys. They came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count the men and their camels. They invaded the land to ravage it.
Sounds like today.
Do what?
Sounds like today,
Yeah,
what's going on in Israel right now. But
They-
Israel is not the chosen people of God.
no, but the principle's the same.
Yeah,
The type of marauding we're talking about. In other words, these people didn't, the Midianites didn't come up there to possess the land, to raise crops, to move the people. They had no interest in anything other than just marauders. That's all their interest was. Um, but they came like locusts, and then and by that, this is a familiar illustration of the Old Testament of using locusts as a plague. And of course, locusts, we would call the closest thing we have to locusts is probably grasshoppers. And they come in swarms and they eat everything. I mean, there's nothing left. When a swarm of locusts gets through the land, with a piece of land, there's nothing left. They've eaten, they've eaten the plants literally down to the ground, leaving nothing. But they come with such tenacity and force. And of course, the idea of locust is a picture that will be used all the way through the Bible as Satan coming or God using people as an instrument of his to bring about discipline or justice or whatever, all the way into the book of Revelation. You'll still see the idea of locusts being used symbolically as God's way of judging both the nations and his people when it's needed. Okay. Verse 6, Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. Who would have imagined that happening? But what does it take to get their attention? They have to be completely destroyed. I mean, they have to be knocked down and everything taken from them, as the marauders would do. And then eventually they get around to going, we can't deal with this anymore. God, do something, please. When the Israelites cried to the Lord because of Midian, he sent them a prophet who said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you up out of Egypt and out of the land of slavery. I snatched you from the power of Egypt and from the hand of all your oppressors. I drove them from before you and gave you their land. I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you live, but you have not listened to me." So God doesn't just immediately send the judge in and say, get it fixed. He makes sure they understand what the problem is. Why are you in this position? What did you do to get yourself here? It's real easy for people to blame God indiscriminately for their circumstance without taking any responsibility or having anything to do with the circumstance they're in. Or, put another way, it's also easy to blame other people. I'm this way because my mother dropped me on my head or whatever, or in my case, I'm this way because the doctor slapped the wrong head. But anyway, that happens. Anyway, but the point is, it's somebody else's fault. And the prophet says to Israel, yeah, you're in bad shape. Your land's destroyed, your crops are destroyed, your income's destroyed, everything about you is destroyed. Why? Because of your actions. because of what you did and or didn't do in relation to me. What had they done? They had disobeyed God. How had they disobeyed? They'd gone after those foreign gods. It's amazing and interesting and somewhat fascinating that consistently the Israelites go after foreign gods. They worship God, they obey God, they live in accordance with everything goes well. And all of a sudden, well, maybe not all of a sudden, but over years in time, they look around them and they say, you know, they got it better than we do. Why don't we worship their God? Now, usually, they wouldn't completely kick Jehovah out of their thinking, but rather they would incorporate the other gods in with their worship of Jehovah. It would be nearly impossible, I would think, to completely eliminate Jehovah from your thinking when you see Jehovah around you all the time in so many things that have happened that God took credit for because God said it was going to happen before it happened. And then it happened, and God said, that was me. I did that. But the Israelites will eventually get in with their foreign gods, and they will fall away, and they will be under the control of a foreign nation. So it's time to bring up another judge and see if we can rescue the Israelites one more time. Verse 11, the angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak at Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Asbiite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. All right. When you thresh wheat, how did they do that? Well, first of all, let me ask this question: what is thrashing of wheat? What are we doing? What is that?
Getting the hull off the outside.
Okay, we're getting the hulls off the outside of the kernel of wheat that we can use to make bread or whatever we're going to use productively with wheat. All right. So, okay, now we got to get the husk off of the grains of wheat. And so, how do we know they did that? What was their methodology?
Lots of ways. They use sleds and pull an animal around on the sled.
Okay. And then they would take the husk and they would throw it in the air. The wind would blow the husk off the grain would fall back down. They'd pick up the grain and the husk would be gone. Works well in West Texas. You can thrash grain like that all day long, day after day after day after day. Okay. What is a wine press? That's obviously where you press wine, okay? But how does it work? It's down ground level or below. How much wind do you get down there? Virtually none. So threshing grain in a wine press is a difficult idea because you're throwing it up in the air, but there's no wind because you're down under your ground level. And so nothing much is happening. It's rather a stupid way to thrash wheat. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you do it the way you're supposed to do it?
They were trying to keep it hidden.
Okay, because if the Midianites see you out there throwing this grain up in the air, and the wind blowing the husk of it, you're pretty easy to spot, and you're fairly easily captured, killed, or your wheat's gone. So you do the best you can under the circumstances, and you stand in a wine press and throw it, or in some way get it separated. Okay, it may not be with air now. You may have to do it. Maybe there are other ways to get it done, but it's certainly not going to be done the way you normally have done it. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." That's a nice thought. Gideon is known by God as a mighty warrior. And Gideon responds, "But sir, if the Lord is with you, mighty warrior, if the Lord is with you, mighty warrior, I'm sorry, why has all this happened to us? Where are all the wonders of our forefathers told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and put us into the land of the Midian, into the hand of Midian." Okay, if you're a warrior, if you're from God, where's God? God, the God I want to see is the God that gets us out of this mess. Where'd he go? I'm totally lost. God, if you're from God, why are we in this mess? What did we deserve to do this? Well, the angel says to him that God is still around. God is where? God is doing what? God is still in control. Doesn't look like it. From his point of view, from Gideon's point of view, God left last Thursday. Okay, he's just nowhere to be found. How does this work? Ever felt like God's not around? Ever felt like God's walked off and left his people, the church, the Christians? I'm sure they felt that way in the first century. When you see your family being thrown to the lions or being burned at the stake or crucified, as the case may be, but it comes across your mind, where's God? Why is this happening? Maybe you've gone through some struggles in your life, going through them right now. And even though as a good Christian, nobody's going to, in this classroom right now, going to say, yeah, I wonder where God is right now. But do you ever wonder? Or if you're sure God's somewhere, he's sure not with you, right? He is somewhere. We're not going to deny that God exists. But does he not see what's going on? Why is he allowing this to happen? Why does he allow people to be killed and raped and pillaged and all these things, as we see in the news today, going on in Israel? Why does God allow that to happen? Why does God allow a man like Hitler to take power and kill people? Why did he allow a man like Nero to come in and kill Christians? Aren't they his people? And so these questions come to mind. And And it may be even more personal than that. I've known of people whose children got into all kinds of trouble. And they couldn't help but ask, where's God? Why is God allowing this to happen to my family? I didn't do anything to deserve this, God. And yet, I'm being hurt.
But you believe the lies of the people who want to enslave you.
Or your children did.
And you let them rule, you let them rise to power. They take everything they want.
The Lord turned to Gideon and said, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. I'm not sending you. Am I not sending you? The Lord, Gideon asked, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. The Lord answered, I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites together. And it's time for you to go. So we will finish that point next week.